Reframing Mindset podcast, where I clear my head of the thoughts that are preventing clarity, practice my speech, among other things. Episodes range from informative knowledge to funny stories about my experiences, and in the future, maybe include interviews. So subscribe and enjoy. Episodes drop every other day.
Okay, welcome to the podcast. The concept of this episode is basically an episode so I mentioned that when I was starting the episode, I said was picking some communication and I mentioned that the communicators, I mentioned the door to get to and something. So funny enough, I'm listening to that. I just have the lamp freeze, the exponential freeze and stuff like that. You can use that with plants, with the fruits and stuff like that. I mentioned doing those fruits. You can use that logic with the fruits. What happens is that you start with basic things. So, and this relates to many of the episodes I talk about mindset of shortage and mindset of abundance. What happens is that once you start, you won't be able to as much in the first year as compared to another year and stuff like that. You may not be able much at the start. And what will happen is that you will do that because you're not giving as much at the start, you'll be like, oh my god, if this is worth it and stuff like that. And what happens is that that's the period of shortage. And then you have the exponential growth and stuff like that. And it be like the never end. This phase is like the never end. But over time, there will be a plateau. There will be a plateau where you actually stop. Where you stop, and then you once it stops, then that's the once it stops, that's the maximum amount you will get for that period of time, and then after that you will get lower. So basically that's the experience now. In my backyard. So I was actually just find out that some tomatoes grow and having at the start. And this is the logic we use with each of the plants that you grow. Because using this logic will happen that you see a lot of time when you actually deal with plants in the first phase of the plant. So what happens that you see the plant and the plant are like this is the difference here. So with the tomatoes it just randomly came in my home and I just started planting stuff like that. And lucky enough it came into my backyard. So lucky enough that what will happen is that sometimes you will be like an intentional plant that you will try to intentionally plant, like for example tomatoes on a specific plant and stuff like that. And if you're amateur you won't know if the plant will come from. You'll be like, oh, you'll be hoping and stuff like that. You'll be hoping that it comes from. Because that's it. The funny thing about the plant. That's the first phase where you can't tell if it's growing or not. Because it's what you're hoping. But what happens is that after a while, when you see it comes up. When you see it comes up now, it's like, okay, yes, now we have something to work with. Now we have a plan to work with. Because we have a plan to work with, we can actually start doing something. Then after a while, then you will see one fruit come and bear from it. And it's like, now we can start. And this is what we call that low phase in the farming. That's the low phase where you get the one, get the one fruit, and at this point it's not a lot, but I got to remember that you make a big curve. So you get this one, and it's good enough to actually make you a proper meal or something. But you get the proof of concept to say, okay, yes, now I got this food coming up, and now this food coming up, now we have some fruits and stuff like that. Then what happens is that this is the next phase now. You'll be doing this every one or 2 days where 1 or 2 days a certain part of the field where you have to like so that even in the case of tomatoes and stuff like that, not a tomato. Yeah. So every 1 or 2 days, one of those green tomatoes will turn red. And then you get enough to make up a prayer leaf as well for our next day. So like use that concept again. And then what happens is that this is where the exponential things, the growth is actually going to come. So what happens is that once you grow and stuff, there's going to be like a whole bunch there that basically just turn just right immediately, just turn right immediately. And what happens is that you do that and it turns right, and then you have like a great meal that day, and like it's like a big feast that day. You get that one week, and what happens is that because that big feast was so good, what happens is that you basically do something like you store some away because that was a big reap, big harvest. Then what happens is that that's where the exponential phase comes. That's where the growth phase gonna come because you're gonna store that, and then what happens is that maybe the next day now you go back and say the next day now you tend to say I don't need to go to the garden anymore or something like to look for that plant. I have some stored up for another day. So another day now there's a piece in and then eat a nice meal. Then when you eat the nice meal, then after a while it finishes. When you go back to the garden now, you see like one. Like for example, say for example, it's 4 tomatoes right back and you're using 2 pence. Eat, steam, and then just grow. Because what happens is that each time you go there, more is getting right. You're picking more, you're using more. You may have your belly may get full and stuff like that. Your meal is getting more quality, meaning just smaller stuff like that. You're storing more, you need less, and just growing. And then because it's growing, you every time you go back, it's more and then big exponential big growth phase. And then the big growth phase is not um, is the part where the other lessons come from talk about food storage, storing food in these stuff, maybe giving friends, family and stuff like that. And then some you have enough where you can actually go and sell some if you actually do that way because one thing that we have so much in excess that that commodity now becomes a value where people actually come and maybe pay for that and say, okay, yeah, they actually put a price on that and pay for that. Because you have so much in quality, very quantity that they don't even know what to do with it and stuff like that. And then boom, people will actually come and pay for that and take a price for that. Then using this, you will have like a whole period of that food. You're gonna go, my God, that's abundance of that. And this is the next phase because what happens that the first phase you felt like oh my the first phase you felt like you're never going to get one tomato or something like that. Then the next phase you feel like you're never gonna run out of tomato. But yeah, it's going to be but using the part where you feel like you're never gonna run out of tomato. You start doing this thing like you're selling and stuff like that. Eventually the plateau will come where because you're doing these stuff, doing to friends and family and all this stuff, which is good when actually in the time of abundance and storing because what happens when you actually give to friends and family is that maybe your storage is full. Because your storage is full now, you actually have you start to find other means of actually getting rid of the product. So that's how the other means come. So because you're doing that now, you use this phase. It feels like you're never going to run out of tomatoes. That's this next phase. You're gonna feel like you're never going to run out of tomatoes. And then what will happen is that there's going to be a plateau. There's going to be a plateau where the method of how you're picking and storing and giving away and all this stuff. There's going to be a point where the amount that you pick up from the garden and the amount that you make store and give away and stuff like that will be the same. So like for one day you go out and everything and it's the same amount that day. And then what happens now the next day when you go out and reap and all this stuff, what happens that you than rep more than is going to be produced. And what happens is that because you rep more than is going to be produced now, then the yield is going to be lower and all this stuff. And then eventually that year for that plant is gone. That year for that plant is gone. Like the best the nice time for that plant is gone. It's going to be down and stuff like that. And then what you can use that is called a season. Like that's a season of a plant. The season of a plant. And this is just where we use in like perspective of experience. Don't compare your first year to another a person second year stuff like that. So what will happen is that you um, when that plant season is over, you're not getting any more tomatoes or anything like that from that plant and all this stuff. You may, given that you stored up and all this stuff, you may have for like the first year you have enough based on the amount you stored, you have enough for like maybe 1 or 3 months of nice tomatoes to eat and stuff like that. I was like, okay, that's good. That's good. And that's enough. And then maybe by the end of the time your tomato that you stored up finishes, then you have a new set of tomato is being prepared up in the backyard. New set of tomato is being prepared up in the backyard. So what happens now, and this is where I talk about the time of abundance, because I'm looking at tomatoes, what I realize is that if I go to the market and you see big tomatoes that you sell, and then at the end of the personal place, I forgot the tomatoes there are even bigger. The tomatoes there are even bigger. So what happens is that sometimes it's not the fact that the size of it doesn't really comes out like how they grow specifically this big and stuff like that. What happens is that we use a logic of time of shortage and time of abundance. So that first phase we are talking about you get some nice small quality tomatoes and stuff like that to hold on this time. The next time now when the plant comes in your backyard, what happens is that that plant now is not something that you just go and say, okay, this is my meal that is going to feed me and sustain me and all this stuff. Now it's like commodity where you're like, oh yes, I have some stored up, I, I could use some more and I could use some more and this can actually make my time make my food better and all this stuff because what happens is you're coming from experience. They know that they know the different phases of the season and all this stuff. And then at the end that you have some saved up, you have some plants saved up already. So what happens you do that, you use the plants, the next time it comes out, you're going to go through the same phase. You're going to go through the same phase where you're going to wait and wait just for one tomato. Then you get like taking your one, getting your one meal, nice meal and stuff like that. Then you're gonna see get out a nice four that comes up, a whole bunch that comes up. and you get a nice meal for 2 days. Then what happens now? And then that day now starts the exponential phase where you're like every time you go there, you're gonna be tired of picking up tomatoes and stuff like that. Your whole room gonna be filled with tomatoes. Everything like that. So that's why we need to get rid of and this is the time of bonfire. What happens is that the difference between the first year and the second year is that you're going you are starting out from abundance. You're not starting out from shortage. You're not planting this thing for the first time. You're not relying on that as your, like for example, your own source of income or anything like that. That is your commodity. So what happens now is that and what happens that your land is more fertile the second year than the first year. So what happens is that the plant now that same tomato plant have a chance for it to grow bigger, get more nourished and all this stuff. And what happens is that because you're out there so store some and stuff like that, you will get more per and this is related to the episode quality versus quantity. Where if they are small, you're getting so much quantity that they build up the quality of one of those small ones and all this stuff. That second year is very much way more quality driven than quantity driven. Way more quality driven than quality driven than quantity driven. Using the same logic, of the exponential curve. And then boom, eventually finish. And the third year now, this going to be the same thing, but it's going to be, as I said, the yield is going to be bigger because what happens is that you're having these stuff with excess. And you have to go to, like, for example, you go to KFC, or any of these places, you go to a grocery store and have things like ketchup, Heinz ketchup, and all these stuff. This is where all these simple items are born in this excess because what happens is that in each year you use that to meet and all these stuff. You're yielding a better quality all this stuff. And then what happens is that in the first year you're using those tomatoes for basic meals. Like for example, you know, that's calm noodle or mackerel, anything like that. Then you have enough now that you can do some experiment in a jar and all this stuff. Then you going out like right around the house like maybe ketchup. They do any make all kind of sauce and all this. Because what happens is that you're not operating from a time of shortage. You have the time or the leverage to experiment. That's what in business about is like R&D, research and development and all this stuff. You have the time now to actually go out and experiment with the same thing that you were out yourself begging for one. You're actually begging for one. When you're having enough money to add certain experiment, you say, okay, let me try to make some ketchup and all this stuff and all these things. I was saying like the same thing. Then what happens is that no, say 1 year now you learn how to make ketchup and all this stuff and it's good ketchup. The next year now using the same logic with the same tomato with the exponential curve. When you get the tomato, what will happen is that you will tend not to only store for like basic needs, you will tend to go towards that same food to do things like ketchup and all this stuff, and then your method of storage is the same thing. Then boom, you use the same selling method and all this stuff, and then you sell instead of the tomato, just they're selling ketchup and all this stuff. That's why I would think that acting again and all this stuff. It's the same method they're using, but they actually just have the time to actually first send it out in a different way. And sometimes they just put an account to send to family and all this stuff. And then boom, then the father comes and all. What happens that you're using that logic, what happens is that the first phase you're using those foods um, to sustain you, to build up your energy, bring you not nutritious meal and everything like that. And it's going to be the logic you use with every plant, every herb, using this logic with every plant, every herb, or everything like that. That's so the basic process you go. You start out struggling just to get one, then you're trying to get many, and we're gonna get the menu. What happens is that the use case for that's the key thing. The use case for what you were using for the short one, you have it in abundance, but you don't even use those stuff again. Like you really use them for that reason. You'll be like, oh, like, for example, let me see, you have the same condition, like you have, like for example, you have cold or anything like that. You have lime in so much quantity that hey, you may have cold again, but hey, you don't even need so much lime for you because there's a cold and go and use other lime to cure a common cold. Like you don't need that much. What happens is that you have enough to do something like, oh, let me just go out and make some lemonade. No, that's weird. The family no joy to make lemonade and all this because we have enough to do um, to cure the cold and know to do something different like make lemonade and all this stuff. Simply the tomato have enough to make some basic food and then now we have enough to make ketchup make ketchup and all this stuff. And then boom, then you need the next next step and all this stuff. And that's the logic we're going to use with everyone, every single one of the plants that you that you have. You start out with them in a shortage, then you're going to have them in abundance. Then you're going to go out and then you're going to find the various different use cases for them, like use different stuff, getting the fancy meal, getting the fancy drink, and all these. Use this with every single one of your products. Use the thing that I use to meters and stuff like that. But I'm going to use that same logic with many of the stuff, and then what will happen is that you start out with one product, you have that product now in different quantities, and then people be like, oh my god, this person makes so much fancy stuff, and then what happens is that they don't realize that the same thing that what you started with was basic tomato and a basic plant, and then you have honestly, that's many of the stuff that happens now where like everything at water selling buckle and all this stuff. The period of shortage. It's a period of shortage and a period of abundance. The buckle and all this stuff is what happens when you actually have the product in that kind of abundance. You have the time to experiment, to do all these stuff, where to do all these different things with the same product, with the same product. Have them in yeah, and then what inside. You're always gonna have them in your quality. That's a real part of it. Where you have the luxury of these um things with. You're going to always have the product in a great quality. No, because you're not starting from the first year, you're starting from experience now. You're always gonna have the stuff in the best quality. You have all the freedom to try out all these stuff, all these things and all these stuff in the best quality. I try to chop on all these funny stuff like the go you're watching the first working class and you're looking at their tomatoes, you're looking at their oranges and their oranges is 10 times the size of what you're doing and all these stuff. And sometimes it's not that you're something anything like that. I think that the simple method here, you're one of the first year you have those stuff. And this is we're talking about kind of first year to be a 400 year or stuff like that. 1 year now is they're just starting out. Then now you're focusing now on other things like okay, the plant now is not something that we live off or just to survive. Is a luxury meal. It's a luxury meal or stuff like that. So it's a luxury meal now. And then when it's a luxury meal, after a while, what happens is that sometimes you get feels out that oh no, yeah, I started out doing tomatoes and all this stuff. That was trying to that butter. I have so much tomato now that I tried. What happens that one day I have so much tomato that I tried. Never learned every lesson that the tomato will teach. And we don't want to listen to the tomatoes anymore. But what happens is that the lesson is there where somebody coming up now, hey, we have some tomatoes and we have all you know, so this person came up using tomatoes and all those lessons. By the time he start using tomatoes, I know they should do the same thing that have different products like maybe fruits, fruits, or things like that, using the same logic with fruits and stuff like that. What happens at this, the difference is that the tomato is smaller, but the breadfruit is a bigger product. Maybe the next thing now is yam and stuff like that. You're using the same logic, but it's going to be a bigger product and all these stuff. But you use what happens that you're using the core principles. The core principles that are there. So using logic. So that's the basics of this episode where I'm trying to get some tomatoes in the backyard and I'll be in my backyard and going up to start to grow. And what happens is that from the and I get two and I picked up two that were right and then they come down and pick like so many pick two that were green and this and this really is like it's all about the hockey. Hockey is something that if you pick on right, if you pick it on right, you will have it can be very poisonous. What happens that this funny stuff is the period of this is what happens in the period of shortage when you prematurely pick something and then the danger occurs. Once you actually pass that worst phase, you actually go into abundance where you don't even think about how to amount this and this is the period of abundance where you're trying to achieve. Like for example, like for example, growing up as a lionfish. I think that's the name, kingfish, lionfish. Lionfish people eat lionfish, but if you strip, they say that if you prepare it a certain way, it can be very dangerous. So what happens is that most of the danger comes, from the actual approach of a time of shortage, where you're basically looking for that food to survive. That is your food. That is their only means of survival. So that's where the danger is coming from and all this. And that's where operating from abundance now. You have much going on this and there are things that you will actually out this approach to that you can give out free as gift and all these stuff. Everything that happens that what happens at one, you get the lessons, you know how to plant it, you know you know the process of reaping and all these stuff, reaping and all these things. And um then the land is more fertile than before. So it's like it's really better quality. You're actually not starting from a lack of knowledge, you're starting from various knowledge. Starting from various knowledge. So using that the warrant that sometimes people will be starting out from tomatoes. And then when they see me now, I'm always that same logic with a different language, breadfruits and all this stuff. And then breadfruit season and doing that. Way quality stuff. Then when they start to do that, when they start doing that with breadfruit, then they see me do that with a different product and all this stuff. So what happens that it's the same concept. The same concept that I use okay, the first phase is hard, then I have a period of abundance, then the plateau, that's the phase, the plateau. You have to recognize the plateau now. Then what happens that time is time for you to realize, okay, this is my downtime, this is the end of the season for that plant. Sure, this is not going to look for that plant for that year. Then you figure out the real storage method, the real storage method and all this stuff, various ways of storing the food and all this stuff and then food. When you have the real storage method now, um, when that season is over, the next year now you got enough catalog and all this stuff. More come more better quality and then you can have your goal. And then use this logic you use in the land to when that plant season is over now, you have the land money to actually go out and do some other experiments and all this stuff. Because what happens is after a time, maybe it's not the fact that it's a lot fees or stuff like that. Maybe it's like, oh, it's not a plateau or anything like that. Maybe it's like the season, that plant season is over. The bearing season for that plant is over. You have to recognize that, okay, that's the time for the season is over. Then you can actually prepare your land in accordance to that season, accordance to that season. Like, okay, that's how people know that that's the best time to do that. And that is the season. After I realize that's the season now, then you start effectively get the best of the land, go develop it, and then use the same process and all this stuff. And what happens is that sometimes we don't see when you see that big land or big stuff like that, it's like, okay, we didn't start out we didn't start out with this big vision. We didn't start out with this big vision. So this big vision or stuff like that, it just came from us seeing like the intermediate planting. And then after a while we developed some theory hypothesis. Then what happens is that we use that theory and maybe it works. And then because it works, the next time it's like, okay, maybe it works, but not for the reason what you think. And then when you research that, what you go there, see it again, like, oh, maybe it's a season or something like that. And then over time you build up better knowledge of the thing using that simple stuff. And one day you just see yourself talking in the right terminology with that, or you're using the right terminology all the time and all this stuff. And it's like, oh, with that happens. So we started out from the small things. And then over time we are interacting with the same things, but we are interacting with it from a different lens, from a different level of experience. And it's like, oh yeah, it's from a different level of experience now. Then then it's the same thing, but it's from a different level of experience. And then you use that logic to be what is some big work or thing, big things from it. And it's like, oh, all these things kind of really started out from that small beginning. And all this stuff. But the important thing is the small beginning will be like, well, don't compare your chapter 1 to a person's chapter 2. That actually the most important thing is to try to move at your own pace. Try to move at your own pace. It's not with everything that happens, try to move at your own pace. You can't run before you fall. So it's like it takes time. But if you see something successful and stuff like that, it's something basic like that. The theory was there. But what happens that sometimes the theory, you learn the theory, but to apply it in real life isn't as easy. Isn't as easy as learning it in a book or stuff like that. So it's another time to get that theory out. But once what happens that one day you will work and it's like, oh, what happens that you are using the principle, well, it just take a long time. Just like you have to do the science and like that experiment. Like when after you when you have to do the high school stuff like that, one like you getting the answer. Like, the experiment that you do sometimes you do and you're getting the answer. When after you reach the university level, this was my experience, you actually do the stuff. You actually may not get the answer. Like, well, you actually may do the experiment and the answer. Do the experiment for nothing, just to show, or to show that that doesn't work. That's what happened after the university level. That they do the experiment just to show that. And the thing, sometimes sometimes the people who do the teaching, they don't even know. Like sometimes they don't even know that it's not going to work. But they have to actually teach it as a kind of like, yeah. That's what happens in the university. But we actually learn those concepts in university that logically applied into real life. sometimes you need stuff and it may take years for you to even get an answer. And then I'm gonna get the answer. I try and get the answer. And it's like, yeah, I did that my work is a fire. What did is a lot it take a while for us to implement how it comes the way we say it sometimes. And it might take some time. But once the time comes, the time comes, you use it and something like that. So that's basically it for this episode. Thanks for listening.
Well, this is the end of the episode. Thanks for watching and look forward for the next episode. To support this podcast, go to anchor.fm/cssb/support or become a sponsor for this episode. If you have a product that you want to have more exposure, DM me on the Instagram page, Reframing Mindset Podcast, or on Twitter at ReframingP. Either way would help. Thank you regardless for listening, and here's a preview for the next episode.